YouTube, what's up? Back again for another daily fishing video here on Andrew Upshaw Fishing. Guys, I have a cool video for you. We're going to be talking about my 4 favorite metal baits for this time of year. Right now, it's unseasonably warm, in the 80s, and that's just not typical for this time of year, but we have some big cold fronts on the way that I know are going to change the fishing. It's going to push those fish deeper. It's going to concentrate them more on bait, and that's when those metal baits come to play. So that's why I want to do this video now. That way you can kind of get ahead of the curve and catch fish when it gets even colder outside. But hey, I just want to give y'all an update real quick. I got my results back for my scan of my hand, and it all came out well. I actually have a contusion on my bone, so I don't need surgery. And that is probably some of the best news I could have ever had. Yesterday, I did have my skin cancer appointment at the dermatologist. They froze off about 4 or 5 different little places, and the only problem with that is there was one really, really bad spot that they had to remove and send off for a biopsy. I'm not going to stress about it yet because there's no reason to stress yet. I don't have any results back, but it was a big spot, and, we'll just see what happens. But let's dive right on into this. Let's talk about these metal baits. It's getting that time of year. I went out just a couple days ago on Toledo Bend, and it's not there yet. These fish are getting there. They're getting to the right places. They're getting on bait, but there's still a lot of fish shallow. And what that means is it's just been too warm around here. And I think you're going to start seeing that kind of all across the country right now, is especially throughout the South. It's just too warm, and these fish haven't been forced to go offshore yet. So I think you're going to see a big change in the next couple weeks as it gets colder, as we get these really big cold fronts coming through. And these metal baits, man, I'm telling you, there's something special, and we're going to talk about them here real quick. I got my start fishing metal baits a long, long time ago with just the typical slab spoon. This is a 3/4 ounce spoon. This is one I have fished forever. I keep them in my boat. I actually have one tied up on my deck from about November to January every year. It's just that good. Now, I will say this. I honestly believe that the spoon is it's not as good as it was. And therefore, that's why I've kind of moved to other metal baits that, if I get in an area where I feel like they're getting a lot of pressure by the same bait, then I will switch it up and change up some stuff. But one of the most ideal conditions for a slab spoon for me is when it's sunny outside. They can see that flash really, really well. You don't want those low cloud days. You know what I'm talking about, where you get in the fall and the winter time and those clouds are really, really low. It's really dark outside. The spoon, at least this size spoon, doesn't seem to work as well for me. Actually, if anything, the thing that works better in that situation is probably a drop shot. And with a Strike King filler worm, a darker color one too, not just like your pink worm, actually like a dark purple, a June bug, something that's dark that they can see in that low light condition. But more importantly, the spoon is still one of those baits. Now, there's a couple different baits that I'm going to go through today that, some of you may have seen, some of you might not have talked about in a really long time. One in particular is a Flutter spoon. This is just a Strike King 5-inch Flutter spoon. I'm from Texas, guys. We throw bigger baits than usual. If I get in an area where I feel like everybody is fishing the same baits, or maybe even a situation, and this actually situation happens a lot in the wintertime, is you'll get these big groups of bass together. And you throw a spoon down there, like a regular, slab spoon, and you're catching fish every drop sometimes. But you're catching a bunch of these, and then you might catch a grown one. Well, the cool thing about the Flutter spoon is I honestly believe, especially this time of year, if you get those fish to react to it, more times than not, you're going to catch a bigger than average fish on this particular spoon. And that is the biggest key this time of year, is figuring out how to trigger that bigger bite first. Now, can you just keep throwing the slab and catch fish, and then catch a big one? Sure. But I kind of like catching that big one faster. That big Flutter spoon gets the job done. Now, these next 2 baits are a little bit different. These are baits that, some people throw, some people don't throw. The first one is, this is actually called a wing ding. It was originally a rinky dink, which was made off the little George. It's a tail spinner. It has a tail, a blade on the tail. In this particular model, you stick the line through the bait and you tie a hook on the bottom. Now, this has been a staple in the South for a really long time. You look at places like Toledo, Rayburn. I think it got its start on Lake Eufaula, Alabama, with the little George. And they were catching mega bags on this tiny little bait. I mean, to give you a comparison in size, this is just a normal size slab spoon, and this is the entire wingding. This is a 3/4 ounce, though. I mean, it's a heavy bait. And when you're using something like active target, you can actually see this bait really well because this blade's spinning. It's just how dense this particular bait is. You can see it on active target really well. And you can fish it a couple different ways. The two different ways that I really like to fish this particular bait is either cast it out, especially if the fish are relating to the bottom, and the colder it gets, the lower those fish are going to be in the water column. So if they're on the bottom, I'll almost cast it out, let it go to the bottom, and just slow crank it. I mean, like as slow as you can crank it. Now, if you get in a situation where you're like Toledo Bend and there's timber and stumps and brush piles everywhere, it's not as effective. You kind of have to throw it more in open water. And actually, all of these baits, you have to throw more in open water situations. I'm going to tell you right now, I go through a bunch of them every year. Spoons, wingdings, literally everything. I mean, it's just one of those baits that you're going to snag up from time to time, so you need a good amount of them just to make sure you get through a day sometimes, or even a week or 2 weeks of fishing. So I like to fish it like that. I like to just real slow on the bottom. Now, the cool thing is, it is so heavy. It's such a heavy bait that you can actually just, you cast it out, you let it drop past the fish, and you rip it up, and you just let it fall on a tight line, not a slack line. The slack line will actually cause the line to wrap around the hook, which therefore fouls your bait, and it won't work right, and everything messes up. So you actually let it drop on a controlled line, and you'll feel the hit whenever they eat it. And the cool thing is the trebble's hanging down here, so if they even touch this bait most of the time, they get hooked, and that is one really important factor of this. Now, this is a bait that not everybody knows about, and I think it's become one of the most effective baits for me in my arsenal at this time of year, especially on fish that are relating on bait that is suspended. So we talked about a bait that you could go to the bottom with, whether it be the wingding. You can do the same thing with a spoon, little light hops. You can swim it through schools. Dropping this to the bottom, you can catch them off the bottom, you can catch them on the bottom, you can do a lot of different things with it. Now, this next bait, it's something about this time of year, dropping through bait balls, it just really works. And this is actually a Nichols, I don't even know the name of this spoon, but it's a really small flutter spoon, is basically what it is. I mean, it's tiny. It's actually the same size as a regular jigging spoon. But the fall on this, it's a little bit slower fall. So it has that flutter spoon fall. So you know how a flutter spoon falls like this. And as it falls, it creates a slower fall rate. Well, this spoon is light enough that as it's falling, it just is a lot more compact size. So to give you an example of how this bait fishes, it's really similar to like if you went out and you're throwing a rage swimmer, for instance, just a single swim bait and you're throwing it around. Well, a lot of times, an angler might want to throw a 4-inch, so a 3.75-inch rage swimmer. He's chunking that out, and he's getting a bite every once in a while, but maybe he's too big for the bait that's around. Well, it's similar. The spoon is similar to like downsizing to like a 2.75-inch rage swimmer and rolling it through there and getting a bunch of bites. Well, this time of year, sometimes they key on that really slow fall, and I'm not saying really slow, so it's relative. I call it really slow because if you throw this spoon through there, it drops like a rock right past them. This spoon kind of floats in front of them a little bit. And when it floats in front of them, sometimes that's exactly what it takes to trigger those fish. So paying attention to how the fish are relating, if they're relating really high in the water column, if they're being really finicky, these 4 metal baits will really help you load the boat this time of year. When it comes to tackle for these particular rigs, all 3 of these I fish on the exact same rod reel line. The small flutter spoon, the wingding, and the slab spoon. And when I tell you this, you might not believe me. I actually throw mono on all 3 of those baits. Some people are going to say, man, why do you use mono? It's so stretchy and all that kind of stuff. That's how I grew up fishing it. And, you know, over the years I've changed. I've gone to fluorocarbon and done all these things. But as soon as I went back to mono, I had more success. I think the stretch in it helps me keep the fish pinned. You know, I'm not, you know, especially when you're hopping a spoon or something like that, you have a tendency to over jerk it. And the rods that we have nowadays, we tend to go too heavy on our actions, or we don't have the right composite, you know, rod where it's not parabolic enough. So fluorocarbon has no stretch. So when we jack on them, we're pulling that hook to the edge, and these spoons, these wing dings are so heavy that it actually causes the bait to fly out of their mouth when they jump. So having that mono, still using the same rod as maybe you would use for jigging a spoon, that will help reduce the amount of fish that you lose. And that is probably one of the biggest curses of throwing these metal baits, is you lose fish. So 12 to 15 pound mono. I'll actually go down to 12 pound line on my spoon because I really like having a little bit lighter line. I feel like it gives the spoon a little bit more action. Same thing with the wing ding. Same thing with the little spoon. You know, the cool thing about the little spoon, it comes with a good hook and it has the swivel on top. Now, when it comes to fishing the bigger spoon, you know, I use all this is on Contra monofilament. You know, this is a Strike King line, and their mono is as tough as anything I've ever used. I mean, I can confidently go throw 15 and never worry about breaking it ever. But this big spoon, I'm still throwing it on 15 pound tests, but I actually upsize my rod. So when I'm throwing the smaller stuff, whether it be the little jigging spoon, the little Flutter spoon, or the wing ding, I'm throwing a 7.3 Magnum hammer. It's a luge rod. It's in the Custom Pro lineup. It's just a rod that it's a catch-all rod. You know, if you watch my channel enough, you know that I use that rod for vibrating jigs. I use it for topwaters, bigger topwaters, and I use it for any spoon-related thing that I can think of. It's just a rod that I am very, very confident in. I know how it works. I even use it for single swim baits, whether it be 6 pound line or 20 pound line. It's just the rod that I use a lot. But it's a great rod for this particular bait. But when I'm going to the bigger spoon, I actually found a rod. It's a little hack. It was made for something else, you know. And if you look at luge rods, they have a lot of different ones, and they have them made for different things. Well, one of the rods is a swim bait rod. And the specific swim bait rod I'm referring to, it's actually the ledge rod. It was designed by Mark Rose. And that particular rod I use for all my Flutter spoons. It's a 7.5 foot rod. It's a medium heavy, but it has a good balance to it. It has a good bend to it. So when I jerk it up, the worst thing you can have happen when you go to jerk that spoon up, whether it be the little or the big spoon, when you go to jerk that spoon up, if you have too heavy of a rod, you're pulling it out of their mouth because they haven't had a chance to really grab it. They're going and slashing at it. They're fighting for it. They're doing all these things. You've got to have a rod that has a little bend to it. And that rod is perfect for this bait. But it's also the rod I use for my hybrid hunter, fishing it around grass. You know, I'm throwing a lighter rod than like Castledine uses. Castledine uses a heavy action rod. I mean, it's a big rod for his hybrid hunter. And I think it's just like anything else. Like lipless crankbaits, Kevin Van Dam likes, you know, maybe more of a fiberglass rod, whereas Dickie Newberry likes a heavy action flipping stick. And neither one of them are wrong because it fits the style of their fishing. But that particular swim bait rod, and I think it's discontinued, and I think like right now is like the last time you can get them. So if you can get one, you should get one. I think I ordered a couple of them in my last order because it's just that good a rod. But that particular rod is one that I have relied on for the last few years for the hybrid hunter, for this big spoon. I even throw a swim bait on it. But you know, the deal is it's just different ledge fishing now. You know, when I first started ledge fishing, it was pre forward facing sonar. So yeah, we still had side imaging, down imaging, things like that. But it wasn't as focused on seeing the exact fish that you're fishing for. You know, we were actually casting big swim baits out there and rolling them on the bottom and trying to figure out little intricacies to way to trick fish and visualizing in our minds where these fish were. And now it's just, you can just point your troll motor and you can see everything's out there. But more importantly, find these metal baits, figure out how to fish them, use mono. I promise you will have better success using mono. Change your hooks. You know, the hook on this Nichols is a really good one. and it comes with a skirt. I actually, a lot of times I'll still change this one because I don't like the skirt on here. Because it ups the profile. You know, I mean, if you look at it, now this bait is a good half-inch or inch bigger than the slab spoon. So I actually go to the same size hook but no skirt, which will downsize the profile of the bait. But I change the hook on all of my spoons, all of my wingdings, and I even change the hook on all of my flutter spoons. I just think it's really important to have good hooks. I use a lot of different hooks. You know, I use the Gamakatsu bronze round bends. I use that that owner one that Todd turned me on to. It's the Zoe one. It's like the sharpest hook I've ever used in my entire life. You just got to find the treble hook that works for you, but please change your trebles. It will make a world of difference when you're trying to land fish. Guys, I really hope y'all enjoyed today's show. I hope y'all learned how to use these metal baits and when to use them and why I use each and every one of them. If you get a chance, hit that sub button in the bottom right.